Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Combating Cancer. My name is Gwen Kelly, and I'm your host. And if you're brand new here, thank you so much for joining this community and taking the time to listen. This space means everything to me. A little bit about me: I was diagnosed with stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer at 19, and that diagnosis flipped my entire world upside down. I created this platform because I never want anyone navigating cancer, whether you're in active treatment, remission, caregiving, or grieving someone you love, to feel alone. Cancer is terrifying, it is isolating, and it changes you in ways you don't even realize until years down the line. This podcast is a place where we talk about those things honestly. Today, I wanted to dive into a topic I get asked about constantly: the long-term side effects that followed me after treatment and surgery. I talk so openly with you guys about everything, so I figured it was finally time to really sit down and unpack this. Not just the physical side effects, but the mental and emotional ones too. And if you're listening to this as a survivor, caregiver, or someone in treatment, I want you to know that everything you're feeling is valid. You're not being dramatic, you're not being weak, you're just being you. So let's start with this physical side effects, because that's always the first question people ask me. Do you still have symptoms? Are there things that never fully went back to normal? And the answer is yes, absolutely. One of the biggest things my doctors warned me about after my brain surgery was the possibility of weakness on the left side of my body. If you've listened to my very first episode, and if you haven't, go back and check it out because I explained everything leading up to my diagnosis. You'll remember that I had difficulty moving my left hand and leg. In the early weeks, I was literally dragging my leg behind me. It felt heavy, uncooperative, like it belonged to someone else. I remember trying to walk down the hallway in my house and having to consciously think about lifting my leg because it wasn't responding automatically. And for someone who was 19, in college, living a totally normal life just days before, that was terrifying. It was this loud, unavoidable reminder that my body had been through something traumatic. Eventually, it did get better. My brother Frankie and I spent weeks doing laps in the Minnesota winter, me shuffling across the ice, dragging my legs, slipping, stumbling, and him pushing me, cheering me on, laughing when I would just be complaining. And, that period taught me patience. Each day got a little easier until one day it just worked again. My leg healed completely, and I'm so thankful for that. But my left hand is a different story. That's a side effect that stuck with me permanently. If I hold something for too long, it shakes. If I try to text or type with my left hand, it quivers. And yes, people comment on it a lot. They'll ask, "Are you nervous? Do you need to eat?" And I think, no, this is from an 8-hour brain surgery. It's a physical reminder I carry every day, just like the zigzag scars on my head. And I'd be lying if I say it never bothers me. It does, but I've stopped seeing it as something to hide. Now I just see it as something to be a part of my story. And yeah, I will admit, sometimes I still get embarrassed and, I have dark humor, so I'll just make a joke. But now the second major side effect, and honestly one of the hardest ones for me to accept, was the overwhelming social anxiety I developed after surgery. Before cancer, I was the girl who loved being around people. I was the loud one, the talker, the social planner, the one who went out of her way to make friends everywhere. And then suddenly, after surgery and treatment, being in a room full of people felt like walking into a sensory nightmare. It's kind of like when you hear nails across a chalkboard. That was what it felt like in my head every single day. Loud noises hurt my head. Multiple conversations happening at once felt like knives in my brain. I would show up to events so excited, thinking, I can do this, I'm fine, and within minutes, I'd be fighting tears, shutting down, completely overstimulated. And the worst part, I didn't even recognize myself. I'd never experienced anything like that before cancer. I remember leaving places in a rush, crying in the car, telling myself, why can't I be normal? Why can't I just handle being around people like I used to? This is getting so annoying. And I know a lot of survivors listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. Cancer changes your nervous system. It impacts how your brain processes the world. And even though I wish I could say I'm totally past it, I'm not. But it has gotten better. Therapy has helped, time has helped, and most of all, knowing my triggers helped. When you know something might overwhelm you, you can prepare for it instead of being blindsided by it. Another big one for me is memory issues. This was something I didn't think would hit me as hard as it did, but my short-term memory just isn't the same as it used to be. It's not terrible, and you wouldn't know it unless you hang around me like 24/7. But I'll ask someone a question and I'll get an answer, walk away, and then I'll ask the exact same thing 10 minutes later without even realizing it. I'll tell a fun story and someone will be like, "You've already told me that." And I'll generally be like, "Wait, I did?" And or I'll be like, "Hey, like, did you end up putting that thing away in the sink?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, you literally watched me do it." I'm like, What are you talking about?" It's embarrassing and it makes me feel self-conscious and it's not something I love talking about. But again, this is real life after cancer. This is what many of us deal with. And then, there's the light sensitivity. Concerts, not really my thing anymore. Flashing lights make me nervous. Part of that is because the very first sign of my tumor was a seizure. And even though my neurologists have confirmed I don't have a seizure disorder, that fear sticks with you. The other part is that it literally just hurts my eyes. And speaking of things that hurt, temperature changes. When it suddenly gets hot or cold, I get the worst migraines known to mankind, like those debilitating migraines, the stuck in the bed all day migraines. And again, that's something I've had to learn to work around. I can't prevent them, but I can prepare myself. And I think the biggest theme in all of this is learning, adjusting, and understanding that these long-term side effects don't make you weak. They're proof of what your body survived. Here's the part that's important for anyone listening who has gone through treatment. It is okay to grieve the version of yourself that existed before cancer. It is okay to feel frustrated that things don't function the exact same way. And it is absolutely okay to have moments where you think, I thought I was finished with this. Why does this still follow me? Those thoughts do not make you ungrateful at all. It's just human. But with that being said, I found a lot of peace in shifting my mindset because when I catch myself getting pissed off about my shaking hands or my memory or the sensory overload, I remind myself these are small problems compared to what I faced during treatment. If someone had told me during my worst days of chemo, hey, one day your biggest problem will be some memory issues and migraines, I would have taken that deal instantly. I would have said, sign me up. Where's my pen? We don't have to love our side effects. We don't have to pretend they're blessings, but we can acknowledge that they're survivable. And sometimes that alone is something to be grateful for. So to every survivor listening, your healing doesn't have an expiration date. Recovery, it's not linear. And the long-term effects you deal with do not define you. They just remind you of everything you've overcame. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for being here with me and for creating this community where we can be honest about things most people never want to talk about. As always, please feel free to share this episode with anyone who might need it. And if you or someone you know want to come on the podcast and share their story, or if you have a business inquiry, please feel free to reach out to me. My door is always open. I'll chat with you guys all next Wednesday.